There is a need for a competing and complementary post-philosophical rhetoric.
From Aristotle onward, vitalism is an attempt to theorize a self-organizing or self-motivating system.
There is a need for a competing and complementary view of rhetoric as being non-disciplinary.
In thinking about the concept of this kind of experimental interview approach, I find that it resonates quite well with not only with the kinds of things that I try to talk about as compositional practices in the two virtuals, but certainly my own compositional practice.
Or a non-Platonic and non-Aristotelian approach to composition theory.
Which is one where I often look at two or more passages, cuts if you will, from texts and see how they resonate with one another, where the dissonances are, or
from Aristotle onward,
a non-Platonic and non-Aristotelian approach to
figuring out how to write from one to the other and thereby creating a new plane or a new kind of space.
From Aristotle onward, vitalism is an attempt to theorize a self-organizing or self-motivating system.
So here we have a number of different texts working and cutting into one another.
As Greek philosophy developed up to the Renaissance, it paradoxically combined Aristotle's more material answer to this problem with mystical connotations.
Between vitalism and the virtual, I think you begin with seeing vitalism as something that historically has worked against or in relation to a mechanistic or materialistic theory of the universe.
This connection laid the groundwork not only for the link between vitalism and mysticism, but also for modern scientific ideas and practices.
And so in that way, historically, it's been opposed to scientific practices to a degree. And in some cases, you could even look at vitalism as a kind of mysticism or spiritualism or religious belief.
It led to astrology based on an ecological congruence between celestial and terrestrial events.
In fact, one could even imagine intelligent design as a kind of vitalist principle that one would oppose to a more mechanistic theory of evolution.
And yet, something else kept appearing, haunting.
I see Byron's book as taking up a similar kind of approach.
Humming on the screen.
In describing the mainstream path of composition's recent history anyway as one.
Humming on.
That has ascribed to a more mechanistic and materialistic conception of the compositional process.
Humming on the screen.
And devalued or occluded the idea of a more vitalist perception.
Humming on the screen.
But what we can see in Byron's use of the concept of the vitalist,
composition has been haunted by an unseen ghost,
is a very different conception of vitalism from the one I just described.
Humming on.
Which is one that takes a more secular, I guess, approach to the concept of vitality.
Humming on.
By an unseen ghost.
And it's here that I think we can see the development of the concept of the virtual.
Humming on.
By an unseen ghost.
Virtuality as being a way in which
humming on.
The vitalist philosophy
is the continual positing of some more,
intersects with a certain kind of materialist or mechanical philosophy
of some more,
so that you have a kind of vitalist theory of the mechanosphere, which is, I think, what we ultimately see in the works of Deleuze-Guattari, for example.
Deleuze and Guattari write, "We will never ask what a book means as signified or signifier."
I imagine that many RetComp students and scholars have come to theory through reading Victor Vitanza's work or studying with him.
Post-philosophical rhetoric.
We will not look for anything to understand it. We will ask what it functions with. Vitanza, for example, applies one of Kenneth Burke's historical attitudes, casuistic stretching, to the history of rhetoric.
Post-philosophical rhetoric.
In connection with what other things it does or does not transmit intensity.
Vitanza, and particularly through his essay in Contending with Words.
He sets up the categories first, second, and third sophistic, in which other multiplicities, its own intensities, are inserted and metamorphosed, and with what bodies without organs it makes its own intensities converge.
There is a need for a competing humming on.
A book is not an isolated or unified object. Categories such as first, second, and third sophistic have no fixed content, but an assemblage or body without organs,
Humming on.
which allows theories and theorists to be casuistically stretched in connection with other assemblages, from one category or time period to another. Likewise, a name and a date are not simply facts to be listed.
Ulmer devotes much of his discussion of entertainment to the practice of impersonation,
Humming on.
Elvis impersonation in particular.
But terms that signify a collection of statements, practices, and their affects and effects,
Just like the lip curl is necessary for impersonating Elvis.
in the larger constellations to which they are connected.
There is a need for a competing and complementary view of rhetoric.
Perhaps, as Vitanza suggests, one way to respond to the challenges of the excellent university, as well as our intradisciplinary struggles, is to forego these dialectics as, quote, third interval waves.
Humming on. What is it that you want?
Third interval waves.
What is it that you want?
Third interval waves.
A wandering and wondering from the notes.
Third interval waves.
Rather than pure chance or chaos, Kairos is complex and requires the rhetor's ability to participate in the co-adaptive development of a situation.
Third interval waves. The compositional process I am describing
A wandering
is the same whether one is producing an experimental video or an office memo.
and wondering from
This kind of experimental interview,
humming on.
it is not a deterministic process and is completely abstracted from the content of the composition.
I began writing this book so many times. I would sit and type what I thought I was going to type, and yet out came something else.
Life is not linear or static, but a continuous process that folds over on itself and produces increased complexity and individuation.
More often than not, something else.
That is, just as a singularity that draws materiality into states of lowest energy might unfold both soap bubbles and salt crystals, these compositional processes might unfold in a non-deterministic way
Something else.
into a wide range of media,
Something else.
depending upon the other materials and multiplicities with which they intersect in the compositional process.
Humming on.
By an unseen ghost.
That said, understanding the operation of these multiplicities opens the opportunity to engage strategically with their affects.
Humming on.
In addition, this compositional process of ripping, mixing, and burning allows us to rethink how we teach composition.
Humming on.
Ripping is a process of copying, quoting, or citing. It is the slicing of material from one context and its insertion into another. As I will discuss, this process creates conditions for the spread of contagions.
Humming on.
That is, by ripping two or more pieces of media open and inserting them into one another.
For example, one concept that can be built out of my name is hawk, eagle or American ideology. Hawk, to sell one's wares, an economic practice. Haw, laughter, Diane Davis's breaking up the totality, a rhetoric of laughter. Whack, or riding across the curriculum, an aspect of my teaching.
One creates the possibility for information to flow from one into the other, causing mutation.
Humming on.
This is akin to the process by which multiplicities mutate. In this way, ripping leads into mixing, whereby the contagion spreads from the immediate site of the rip through the intersecting media.
Or a non-Platonic and non-Aristotelian approach to humming on.
This proliferation typifies the mixing process as the multiplicities mutate and unfold in a fractal-like pattern. Eventually, this proliferation slows down and the multiplicity returns to a relatively stable state. The mixing is done. At this stage, the composition is burned. The burning process is also one of involution, that is, one both of shrinking but also involvement. Literally, the file size shrinks through a process of data compression. Also, the burned files can be made accessible on the informational network, where the process may be reiterated. It is certainly possible to view the burn file as a finished product that might be copyrighted. However, technically the process